Can I use alternative investments as an RIA? That is today's question on the Transition to RIA question and answer series. It is episode number 129. Hi, I'm Brad Wales with Transition to RIA, where I help you understand everything there is to know about why and how to transition your practice to the RIA model. If you're not already there, if you start out by heading on over to transitiontoria.com, you can find all the resources I make available from this entire series in video format, podcast format. I have articles, I have white papers, all kinds of things to help you better understand the RIA model. Again, transitiontoria.com. Okay, in today's episode, we're talking about if you were to transition into the RIA model, perhaps by starting your own RIA or joining an RIA, could you use alternative investments in that model with your clients? Alternative investments, other people call them alts. Particularly the last couple of years, there's more and more popularity of using alts in investment portfolios. So the question is, if you're using alts now, will you be able to continue to do that? What might that future look like? Or if you're not using them now, but you aspire to start using alternative investments, is that going to be available to you? And part of the reason I want to make this episode is there is at times a misconception out there by some advisors that, the RIA space is lacking in access to alts, alternative investment products. And I think that was fair to say, certainly 10 years ago or farther back. But as with a lot of things in the RIA model, the ecosystem supporting the RIA model has grown to the point that is no longer accurate to make that statement that, hey, advisor, if you were to leave our big broker-dealer firm, our big wirehouse, you are going to lose access to using alternative investments with your clients, or at least the depth and scope of alternative investments that we make available to you here at our wirehouse. Nowadays, if you hear someone trying to say that to you or message it to you, it's more than likely either one, they just simply don't know what the RIA model has evolved to and the ecosystem to support it nowadays, and or two, they are trying to convince you not to go in a different direction because that would involve leaving their firm. So they are trying to either scare you or give you wrong information to get you to kind of stop considering that, might that be worth me looking at for my practice because, you won't be able to do those alternative investments over there. And again, as we're talking about today's episode, that's entirely incorrect. If anything, it is arguably now, not again 10, 15, 20 years ago, but now even better in the RIA model than likely where you are now, depending on the type of firm you're at now. And so to give you an example, and we won't name any particular firms, but if you're at a large broker-dealer firm and they make alternative investments available for you to use with your clients, and there are some nuances which I'm going to get into here on the episode, but keep in mind, they have procured a list of alternative investments that you have to choose from. That is not the entire universe of alternative investments out there in the marketplace for whatever their motivations are, whether it's economics, suitability concerns, maybe just to have a variety, whatever the case is, they have narrowed that field to a subset of solutions for you to choose from. And of course, they would position this as, well, hey, advisor, we've done our due diligence for you. And we went out to the universe and we found, the 60 best options out there. And that's what we make available to you. There's some degree of truth of that they certainly have done due diligence because they want to reduce their liability with potential concerns with clients. And so understandably, they maybe don't want some crazy, super exotic options kind of in that option set. But make no mistake, there's also some other reasons they might have narrowed it down to the amount. But regardless, you as the advisor, that's the playground you have to play in. That's what you have to choose from. And out of fairness, they probably have chosen good investment options to be part of what you have to choose from. But that's not to say there's not other additional options out there. When you are in the RIA space, and we're going to get to how you access them, you likely have access to significantly more alternative investment options than you do if you're at that kind of large captive firm now. Now, does that mean you're going to want to use some of those other options? Still to be determined, right? That's for your due diligence to figure that out. But rest assured, the sheer access to number and type of investment solutions is likely much larger for you in the RIA space than if you're at that kind of captive large firm now. So I want to go through a couple things about kind of how that works. And there's a lot of similarities on this to a recent episode I made about if you are currently using, SMA managers now or investment models that are procured by or made by a third party, can you carry that on and continue with that in the RIA space? Pretty similar here with respect to alternative investments. So one of the main keys to answer that question of, hey, can I use alts in the RIA space if I transition my practice is one based on what are you using now and what do you aspire to use going forward? And so the name of the game is how are you going to access those investment solutions? Again, either the ones that you're currently already using and you want to keep everything as is, or you want to maybe do that and expand your universe and take advantage of the bigger selection choice. So there's a couple ways to potentially access alternative investment solutions in the RIA space. Some custodians, not necessarily all, have procured, kind of similar maybe to your large firm, a kind of platform of options of alts out there. And they say, hey, we've done the same thing. We've gone out to the marketplace and we've procured these. Now, unlike if you're a large broker-dealer firm who has potential liability and needs to supervise your activities, when a custodian procures this type of platform, because they do not have, a custodian has no responsibility to oversee or supervise your RIA activities. When they procure a platform, it's more to provide a value add to the RIAs that are using them as a custodian and saying, hey, if you want to use alternatives in your investment portfolios, here we've helped you out and we've provided the logistical way to access this subset of them out there, and it's all kind of piped in together, and here's why we think you should take a look at that. But again, they can't necessarily have every option out there, but they have tried to make an attractive offering and give it away for you to access through their platform, their alt platform, if you will, that they've built out. So number one would be looking at, hey, what custodian, and I've talked about in other episodes, one day you might be multi-custodial, but as a starting point when you transition to the RIA model, it's almost inevitable you just have a sole custodian, is to look at, hey, custodian, and I want to use alts maybe as an advisor. Do you have kind of a platform built out for me to be able to do that? So one through the custodian. The next option, again, this is similar to that SMA episode I did, is regardless of whether your chosen custodian has a platform available to, you can go to, now there's third-party platforms out there that didn't exist really 10, 15, 20 years ago. These platforms have gone out there and they say, hey, we've gone out to that universe of options. We're not trying to narrow the field down to 60 options. They'll do some degree of due diligence to make sure these are not, completely fraudulent providers out there. So they have a reputation to maintain the platforms. Now, at the end of the day, you, the RIA, are still deciding which products to use. You can't put that onus on the platform. They are just giving you access to these to do essentially that due diligence. But they're going out there and saying, hey, as opposed to you, RIA, having to go out to individual product providers or product manufacturers, whether it's a PE firm or the hedge fund or whatever the case is, hey, we've gone out to all of those and we continue to go out to all those. And we've said, hey, we're going to kind of think of it as like a supermarket, and you, RIA, only have to show up to the supermarket and you can see all these in one place on the shelf. And then to the degree you want to utilize it, hey, we've put all the logistics together and all the technology to make that happen. And so using a third-party platform is absolutely a way to access that as well. Again, those platforms are generally always going to have more availability for you to choose from than if you're at a large kind of firm that is, for different motivations, generally really narrow the field of what you have. So again, when someone says, oh, geez, you can't use alts at all, I mean, that's an entirely wrong answer. But if anything, like I said, you generally have more options to choose from along those ways. And then the third kind of access point is, There's multiple pathways into the RIA model as I speak of frequently. So some of you might end up starting an RIA, others might join an RIA. There's a flavor in the middle. Again, I help advisors figure all that out, pros, cons of them, which would be the better path for your practice. But if perhaps joining an RIA, and there's all kinds of different flavors of RIAs you can join, so don't come into it with preconceptions of what that means. You'd have to understand them to know what that looks like. But part of their value add is to say, hey, advisor, as opposed to you having to start your own RIA, we've built out all this infrastructure for you, and it's easier for you to use our platform than you building the individual pieces, and we'd love to talk to you about that. That's kind of the typical pitch at a high level. But typically nowadays, with the ongoing popularity of alts, that these firms have procured some sort of access point to alternatives. So they have either kind of made their own platform, or more likely nowadays, they are relying on one of these big third-party alts platform that they've gone out there and they've done their due diligence. And there's only a few of the big providers. And they say, hey, we've partnered with this third-party provider. So, hey, advisor, if you join our firm, look at all the options you have available to choose from as well. So part of you looking at an RIA, if that might make most sense, is that if you want to do alternative investments, to say, hey, RIA, how do you help me access all of these potential alternative investment solutions? So again, that's kind of how to access them, but I did want to just also throw a couple kind of key things to keep in mind. So the first one is, this is part of your due diligence on going down the RIA path. So keep in mind, there's three main levels to this, and at a very high level, and I help you with all three of these. The very high level, how does the RIA model work? Is it even a fit for your practice? Will it accomplish whatever your vision and goals are for your practice going forward? Does it make sense to be continuing exploring the path? If it does, as I just mentioned, there's multiple ways into the path. Start an RIA, join an RIA, the flavor in the middle. So next is figure out, okay, how does that work? And then the final step is, depending on what your answer is, okay, how do I put all these pieces together? And one of those pieces is, if this is applicable to your practice, how do I access alternative investment solutions with my clients? So part of your due diligence with this entire process, and again, do not be overwhelmed by this. This is the type of thing I help advisors with, is understand where all these steps are, and then the order to work them through, and how to get through that process. So don't be intimidated by it. But part of your due diligence is to say, hey, what are my current, if you have current alternative investments that you're using with clients, and whatever my chosen path is and whatever my options to access alternative investments, at a minimum, can I at least, to the degree you want to do, is keep those clients in those same investments and just move them over essentially as is, without having to swap whatever that investment is. So the first step is, if you're using alternatives now, does the future path, can I essentially replicate as is, again, to the degree that's something you're seeking to do, exactly how they are now? That's often referred to as like an asset mapping exercise. Oftentimes the custodians will help you with that process, or if you're using a third-party tool, certainly they will as well, as to take a snapshot of your current assets you use with your clients in your portfolios and say, okay, how can we carry those over as is? Can we replicate them? How can we access them? So part of your due diligence is to do that exercise. What am I using now? How and can I access them going forward? And then you might also, regardless of whether you're using alts now or not, hey, if I make that path, what will be available to me, and what maybe is that expanded universe? And I've talked to plenty of RAs that it was only after they got over and they didn't realize how much more was available out there for them to use with their clients, because they've maybe only ever known this kind of large captive broker-dealer world, that perhaps they didn't even realize maybe how narrow that investment pool had been focused on, of what they could choose from. And all of a sudden they come over here and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of options to choose from. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean many or most of those are necessarily good for you or things you'd want to choose, but that investment option pool is generally much bigger. So part of your due diligence as well is just to understand, okay, if I make this transition, if I use this way to access alts, what will be available to me? That's important to know for your kind of long-term going forward plans. Next, you also want to be careful, and this kind of goes back to what you're using currently, is if any of those are kind of proprietary investment products to the firm you're at. Now, thankfully, over the years, there's less and less of this use of proprietary products where a firm not only has advisors, but then has these proprietary products. It could be mutual funds, could be investment models, could even be essentially an SMA manager that's just in-house, could even be now alts where your firm you're at, maybe their investment banking channel or other channels the firm have put together these proprietary alts products. Oftentimes, those are not essentially portable. Those are because they're proprietary to that firm. You might not be able to access them elsewhere. You got to go through the details to confirm that. But my suggestion typically is if you're not already using proprietary investment products to your firm, I suggest you not consider using it because it's not going to limit your options, but it's going to make you perhaps have to change course with some of those investments because you generally have to sell out of those and come up with a different alternative. So if you're not using proprietary investment products now, I encourage you not to start. And if you are, it is something to think about long term is, okay, well, what will I do if I were to make a transition with those investments? Obviously, you need to consider what's best for the client, but just know that that could create some issues. Again, that's part of that asset mapping exercise to see what will or will not be able to transfer kind of in kind, if you will. You also want to factor in the cost involved in this. I mentioned this with the SMA episode here recently as well. So you want to say, okay, if I'm using certain alt products now and I've done the asset mapping and turns out whether through the custodian or through a third party, oh yes, I can access those same alts. Well, you will want to understand what are you paying for them now and what would you pay for them over on the future state. And you might think, yeah, but it's the same investment product. But these things get very blurred because your current firm might either have negotiated some sort of different price than is available over on this option over here, or your current firm might have added BIPs. Usually these are, the cost of these are expressed in basis points. Your firm, so there might be that third party cost for that alt investment, and your firm might have added additional basis points either transparently or not transparently as essentially a profit center for the firm that perhaps won't be applicable over in the new path. Or in the new path, depends on how you access them, there could be a separate fee as well. If that exists, it's generally much more transparent than a lot of captive environments have. But point being, not only do you want to say, can I map over what I have now, if that is something you're interested in doing, not only what would be available to me additionally going forward, but again, how does the cost work in that future path? How does that compare to what I have now? And again, be careful. Don't just make an assumption that, oh, it's X bips what I have now and it's X bips over here, because there's other ways your firm, I mean, you might have some very seemingly low cost alternative investment product at your current firm or a low cost SMA manager, but they're just destroying you on the payout and taking the lion's share of your pay in the payout. And so they are essentially subsidizing the cost of these SMA or alternative products. So you have to look at the full economics involved to really say, okay, how does what you have now or access to now compare to what that future state might look like? So costs involved. And then just to end it, keep in mind, this is a big part of the value proposition when you go down the RIA path, particularly if you have your own RIA, is to be able to say to your clients, hey, one of the benefits of why I've made this change, and in this example, if you have your own RIA, is because I didn't want to be limited by just a subset of the investment solutions out there, clients, even if those were good solutions to choose from. I want to be able to access the entire universe of options. And the reality is the industry continues to evolve. Those options continue to expand. And so I've realized, Mr. or Mrs. Client, that I needed to evolve my practice as well to make sure I'm keeping up with the investment solutions I should be able to offer you. That's one of the reasons I made this transition to the RIA model. I did a whole separate episode on some of these talking points of how to explain it to clients if you want to take a look at that episode as well. But that is part of your value prop is, hey, if I go down the RIA path, I'm not captive to what investment solutions we use. For instance, if you're an RIA and you look at what your custodian has for an alts platform, and if you like what they've built out, have at it, use that. But you are not required to use that. You can go out and look at those third-party options. And that's part of your value add to say to your clients is, hey, I do this work on your behalf. I go out there and find the best of the best investment solutions that we can use, and I need and want the most options to be able to potentially present to you. So that is part of your value add. Now there's additional work with all that, right? For better or worse, if your current captive firm has narrowed it down to 60 and they've given you a one-page data sheet on all of those, and then they've come up with the top 5 or whatever the case is, they've done some of that work for you. Over in the RIA space, it's not the Wild West. These platforms, help you figure out how to do due diligence well. But with more choice comes more work on your part. But that is, again, part of your value add is that, okay, I did look at the whole universe. I narrowed it down based on what's going to be best for you, client. And here's why I suggest we work with these particular investment solutions here going forward in your portfolio. So with that, like I said at the top, my name is Brad Wales. With Transition to RIA, this is the type of conversation I have with advisors all the time of, hey, what does your practice look like now? So in this example, are you using alternative investments? And then helping you understand, how does that work in the RIA model? What are the options available to you? Is that going to be to your benefit or to your advantage to make that change? And how would that impact you both from a flexibility standpoint, from an economic standpoint? That's the type of thing I help advisors think through all the time. Happy to have that conversation with you as well. First things first, though, if you head on over to transitiontoria.com, as I said at the top, you can find all the resources I make available for this entire series in video format, podcast format. I have articles, I have white papers, and at the top of every page is a contact link. If you click on that, you can instantly and easily schedule time to have a one-on-one conversation with me, whether you want to talk about today's topic or anything else RIA related. I'm happy to have that conversation with you. Again, transitiontoria.com. And with that, hope you found value in today's episode, and I'll see you on the next one.